I first want to give God the credit for all of this, including a bigger plan than what I could see, Martha could see, Lisa could see. When we began this process, and it began to be formalized as opposed to just the idea, it took all of us.
Where it originally started was in the Midwest, Chicago and Indiana.
So parish nursing, in my view, is a registered nurse who has had additional education in whole person health with spiritual care as its hallmark. So body, mind, and spirit wellness, spiritual care at the focus, and a nurse that is situated in the congregation to promote whole person health. Martha Urbach, who was an educator here in the School of Nursing at Shenandoah University, was in conversation with the Methodist denomination. Her husband's a Methodist minister, and she had a friend named Kathleen Monge, who was a registered nurse, also ordained in the Methodist Church. And the two of them were having a conversation about parish nursing.
I went to my district superintendent here in Winchester District, Reverend Jack Minnick. He found money to pay for me to attend the 2-day orientation at Park Ridge. There I got to meet Reverend Granger Westberg, who really is the person who came up with the concept of parish nursing in 1984. Came back, talked to John Copenhaver, talked to Jim Davis, and at the same time, in parallel, I was talking to Reverend Peter Ford, who was the chaplain at Winchester Medical Center at the same time. He had already given me some tapes and books from Bernie Siegel. I had already done research when I was at Wesley Seminary on healing and wholeness and Christian healings. So with my nursing background, this was the piece where the pieces started to fit together like a puzzle. And as Martha shared, we then formed this committee of interested people, Lisa Zerl, Peter Ford, Martha Urbach, and we went from the concept to working out how could we do this.
So as we do in healthcare, when you want to start something, you have to start with dialogue and say, what is this thing called parish nursing? Who should be involved? And so really the first thing we did is we put together what was called the caring team. And Martha Urbach, as an educator at Shenandoah, sat on that committee. Another nurse who was adjunct clinical faculty, Mary Clark, and then Kathleen Monge as a minister. And then just because somehow somebody introduced me to Conrad Christensen, he was the pastor at Bethel Lutheran Church here in Winchester. He was on that committee. And then several of my nurse friends who had a strong faith themselves came forward and said, you know, Lisa, I like this idea of having a nurse in a church. I'd like to come together and have dialogue with you about what this could be, what it could mean for the greater Winchester community. So that caring team got started with monthly meetings, and we started exploring what Lutheran General, now Advocate Healthcare in Park Ridge, Illinois, they were the team that worked with the Reverend Dr. Granger Westberg in 1983, 1984, and they really contemporized an ancient model of a woman in a church trained to do nursing type things to promote body, mind, and spirit wellness. So our caring team contacted the folks at Park Ridge, Illinois to learn from their experience with parish nursing.
My dean Jacobansky, picked up the phone and called me. He said, Martha, come down to my office. I thought, oh gosh, what have I done now? And I went in and she said, Martha, the hospital wants somebody from the School of Nursing to be on this committee. I don't know what it's about, but I'd like for you to be on it. And I knew the only reason she called me was because I was a minister's wife. Last thing I wanted was another committee to be on. So I went, and sort of the rest is history. The university supported us. Oh my, I wrote an article. It takes a university or takes a village to do a parish nurse program. The president of college, Dr. Davis, he was behind us. The School of Nursing was behind us. The cafeteria would open early or stay late for us to accommodate the program's meals. The chapel would be available to us for our programs and for some of our devotional sessions. The whole university did it.
Defining our roles, but then coming together and drawing from the strength and synergy of those three partners. So defining that if we were going to have parish nursing, we would have to create an education program so that nurses could learn more about parish nursing, and that was Martha Urbach's role and Shenandoah University's role. For Kathleen Monge, she had been a nurse and now was a Methodist pastor. She was helping to define for our clergy, our community clergy, what it could mean for them to have a nurse in their congregations promoting spiritual care and whole person care. And then from the hospital perspective, we didn't want to own the nurses or employ the nurses, but we knew if we didn't have a supportive network, it would start and stop and fizzle. So my vice president, John Borg, said to me, Lisa, I want you to create a soft support structure wherein we will pay you or a coordinator to coordinate a network of faith community nurses, but we're not going to pay the salaries of faith community nurses. So again, that triad partnership was being designed, developed, and again, it was a God thing. It worked, and it laid a solid foundation for what would be over the next 25 years.
The first night of the program, the first evening, we would put a table out and pile it with scraps that Kathleen and I had collected from mamas and grandmamas and whomever would give us. And after the devotions, they were asked to come up and choose a piece of fabric, and then to tell the group why they chose it. This one reminds me of the wallpaper in my room when I was a kid. This one makes me remember the sundress that grandmama made me or whatever. And their job doing that first session, back then we had it in 2 sessions. Their job then was to personalize that in some way. In the meantime, Kathleen had prepared a muslin square, and they were told, and it had a circle, and they were told to place their piece of fabric on that circle. And then Kathleen took them home and sewed them on that piece. And then when we came back for the second session, they all had to take a turn quilting it. And the olive leaves that surround the picture there, they had to quilt that. So, and then I would take them and get them framed.
I graduated in '97, so I was about the 2nd or 3rd class. And it was small. I had 2 other Episcopalians with me who lived away from here, but pretty much everybody. I think that one of the things that we quickly learned was we were going to have an insignia with something religious on it, and then in my class, I had a Jewish nurse. And we went, can't do that. So we quickly changed that, and that worked out fine. It was interesting when I started giving flu shots during the fall. I would help her at the synagogue, and she would come over and help me. She wasn't busy on Sunday morning, and I wasn't busy on, Friday night and Saturday. So there was a lot of interaction.
So when we started working with the Interfaith Parish Nurse Educational Program, I made it my goal that we would have something that nurses from any faith community could wear and wear proudly. And so I took a nickel. That would be about the right size, because that was close to my nursing school pin size. I figured I could work with a circle. And I went through all these designs and cut and paste. And I met with Bill Urbach was one. Were you there at that meeting? I know Lisa was. And I laid out, here's my idea. And I had these nickels, and I had them different colors, whether there was white or pink, and I had the lamp, because as a nurse, I remember walking down on my graduation with holding my nurse with a candle in. So for me, that lamp was not only connecting me with the Florence Nightingale, but with the education, because it's a lamp of education. But what I found in my research was that the olive branch, other than the Native Americans, where olive branches would not have been a part, but in the whole Middle East, that it covered a symbol for healing in all the major religions. And so I played with it, and I cut and pasted. And so the concept of the white background and the lamp and the olive branch was a coordination of several people's idea that this was the pin that we wanted. Yeah, I'm the one that did the cut and paste, but it really was a blessing of people working together that said, this is the one that we want for the Interfaith Parish Nurse Educational Program. And now I think it has changed to faith community nursing, which is a wonderful thing, but they've kept the symbol. That's pretty awesome.
My husband's feeling is that we need to present parish nursing to the divinity schools so that these up-and-coming ministers recognize the role, and it's not new to them when they get to have churches of their own. And I think that might be a pretty good idea.
In order to educate the individual congregations, I think you needed to start slowly. And I've said this as I lecture, do just something. And what I did was blood pressure checking. Between services, whenever I had a chance, I just had the chance to do blood pressure. And every now and then, and I don't think there are coincidences, every now and then somebody came up with a very, very elevated blood pressure that we sent on to the doctor, and they came back and said, oh my gosh, the doctor said if I hadn't come in, I might have had a stroke, or I might have had this, or I might have had that. So that over time, I think the other thing that many of the people did was I sent out a questionnaire when I came back after the first week, and I asked the congregation, what do you want? And what I heard was, just answer my questions. And new people came into the parish, they didn't know how to find a doctor or a dentist or whatever, and so I was a reference. Visiting people in the hospital, I left my calling card always with the patient's nurse. And I get calls back saying, Helen, someone is going to go home and I really wish somebody would check on them. So it was slow, but it didn't take too long before it was pretty positive.
As a direct result of this program, there was a program started in Richmond, a program started in Roanoke. The big moment for me is a very selfish one, and that is that I think that spirituality in nursing is so important that I wanted to see it to continue. And my wonderful husband agreed to allow me to have a life insurance policy, but I don't ever die. And when I do die, then they will have the money to have an endowed chair for spirituality and nursing. So selfishly, That's my way of keeping my love alive. So that's it.
I think my rewards have been just being there for some of the people that needed me most. Probably the highlight, and I really I continued to say to Doug, I don't have time, I don't have time. And then one night I went to the hospital to visit somebody who was actively dying, and they called me and they said, Helen, what the lawyer did, would you come and witness an X, because he can't sign any more than an X. And I did, and I knew this man very, very well. And his little wife was sitting there, and I knew that they had a daughter that was in a nursing home down in Harrisonburg. And after we got all that done and everything, I called my husband and I said, can I just go ahead and stay the night? And I said, she's so alone. And he said, sure. So I did, and about 5 o'clock in the morning, and he was a priest himself. About 5 o'clock in the morning, he woke up and he said, pretty clearly, Helen, it's Sunday morning, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. And he said, well, I guess I have to get ready for church. So we got him all ready. His wife was sleeping. We finished and we had a prayer, and I said, okay, you're ready for the Eucharist. And he said, well, I'm not taking it here, and he died. Just like that. So I woke his wife, and she said, I knew he was going to die on Sunday morning. And we laughed about it. And I called my priest and told him, because I always did a provisional prayer, and then he came in. And as I went to church that day, I thought, this is very, very, very special. Not very many people have that ability. So from that time forward, it was never something I had to do. It was something I could do. And I have his picture. His wife gave me his picture, and I have it hanging in my office down there at the church. And any day that I'm thinking that, oh, this is too much, I think again.
Well, I actually have a personal story. Pastor Jim Mutt was very in favor of faith community nursing, but he was knowledgeable about system and structure, and he said, okay, Lisa, for this to really thrive at Grace Lutheran, we've got to go through the steps of introduction, introduce, educate, involve, expand. So our first introduction was to our congregation council. And you have to understand, our church is pretty much white middle class, okay? So people have resources and they have access to health care. So I did my presentation, I thought it was a good presentation, to the church council, and Howard raised his hand and he said, why do we need a parish nurse at Grace Lutheran? And my jaw fell on the floor. I thought I had done a wonderful presentation. And Pastor Utt immediately came to my aid, and then I don't even remember what his answer was, but it was enough to convince the council that we needed to have a parish nurse, and we were going to set up a structure and actually change the bylaws of our church to have a social ministry underneath the many, the structure that we had in the church. Again, a God thing. 6 months later, Pastor Utt calls me and says, Howard's having bilateral knee surgery. Do your best parish nursing for Howard. And that's exactly what I did. So I called 2 days before surgery. His wife answered the phone, and I said, hi, this is Lisa Zerl. I'm the parish nurse at Grace, and I understand Howard's having knee surgery. Can I speak with them? So I hear, Howard, Lisa Zerl's on the phone. Who? The parish nurse from Grace Lutheran. What does she want? She wants to talk to you. So Howard gets on the phone, and he's like, hello? I said, hi, Howard. This is Lisa Zerl, and I'm our parish nurse at Grace Lutheran. I understand you're having surgery. Do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? Nope. He wasn't very communicative, but at the end of our probably 3-minute phone call, I said, Howard, would it be helpful for us to have a prayer together? Dead silence. And then he says, can you do that over the phone? And I smiled, and then I asked him, as any good parish nurse does, what would you like us to pray for? And so he just benignly said something like, well, for a successful procedure. So we had a prayer together, and we hung up. I knew he was coming in 2 days later at 6 a.m., so I came into the hospital at 6 a.m. Again, he was surprised to see me. His wife, gave me a big hug and said, "I'm so glad you're here." Just chatted with him a little bit, and then we closed with a prayer again. He had surgery. I visited him one day after surgery. Again, he still seemed a little like, "Why are you interested in me? And why are you taking the time to come see me?" Well, again, fast forward to 2 weeks after surgery, he was having some wound issues, and we got him referred to home care. And 6 weeks later, when he came to church on a Sunday morning, he gave me a big hug and said, "I now know why we need a parish nurse at Grace Lakeland." So I get a little teary because I believe God puts you in certain places to do His work at certain periods of time. And being a parish nurse, I have the privilege, the honor, and the blessing to help others.